Welcome to sunny Rome again. Welcome to this second day of the two-day workshop implementing co-funded European partnerships and training for newcomers, jointly organized by the Airlearn and the European Commission. I'm Tinois from the Research Council of Norway, and also today we have both on-site and online participants. And since we have some new participants, I briefly mentioned that yesterday the focus was on what is a co-fund partnership, legal requirements, governance of a partnership, different roles in consortium and issues like firewalls within a consortium, openness, how to include new partners, stakeholder involvement, organization of joint calls, and additional activities. And we also had more intense discussions and Q&A sessions, which we will have also today. But today we shift focus a bit. We will focus on the Airlearn tools, financial requirements of the consortium agreement or grant agreement, internal financial arrangements, how do we finance the partnerships, data transfer monitoring report requirements, phasing out strategy, and also follow them with Q&A. All the slides and the recording from the plenary session will be available shortly after the event. In addition, the organizers will produce workshop reports and a summary of the Q&A. I'm quite confident that today's presentation will be equally interesting as those yesterday. Yesterday, the feedback from one of the participants, I think, was quite good. It was that it was like being a sponge. So it's kind of a sponge event. There is so much information. What I can promise you that today it will be a packed day with a lot of useful information and comprehensive presentations that will be definitely useful also after the event. What was also said yesterday, that was really the added value of being present on site, networking, getting to know other people, working with the same issues, having good experience with how to really deal with the partnerships. And what we have seen is that there is really a good mix on site with really experienced people working with partnerships and totally newcomers. So that is really the benefit of being present in this type of event. As yesterday, we will have dedicated Q&A parts throughout the day. For the online audience, ask questions via the chat. If some of the on-site audience also have the chat open, you can also ask the questions there. Otherwise, in order for the recordings to be good, we will have to use the microphones here at the podium in case you have questions, as we did at the end of the event yesterday. So without further ado, I think we jump straight into the first presentation. So please welcome Christiane Wehle from the Airlearn that will talk about tools provided by Airlearn. Please.
Thank you very much, Tony. Good morning, everybody. It's good to see you here in the room. Good morning to everyone at home. It's really a pleasure to be here and better that way. And do a little bit of a warm up, as you can say. It's just to show you the information that Airlearn provides to you, how to find it, and maybe to answer some of your questions on what information we provide to you and what it is for. So what I'm going to give you is an overview on the communication channels of Airlearn, and the most relevant information that we saw was picked up by the stakeholders on our website. We will go a little bit through the well, maybe test ourselves how to get there, just to see that all the structure that we are providing will be familiar to you after the workshop. When in the past events we had about the newcomers for the partnerships, after this event, after this workshop, we were told a lot of time, if I only had known that you were providing this, that would have saved me a lot of time. And I think that it is important that you go home afterwards just knowing that there is this site and what basically we are providing. You will not know everything, but just that you have an idea on where to look at and yes, what information is there. So this is not very unusual. The communication channels that Airlearn is providing, we are communicating mainly, and this is one of our core business, so to say, with our website and the information you can find here. Roland yesterday has shown you basically the structure of it and some of the information you can find here. We also have the Airlearn News Alert, and I would really recommend you to register for that. We are trying to provide the information needed to the partnerships and all the actors in the partnerships on a regular basis. We have almost 3,500 recipients with our news alert, so we are really trying to catch up the most important information there. And I think it's really important that you register here. And of course, we also have LinkedIn with almost 900 followers, which I think we can do better, but compared to other networks our size and our purposes, it's quite a good number. In the project phase that we are in now, according or along the new partnership process that we're having in Horizon Europe, we are targeting and reaching out to all the partnership stakeholders, not only the public-to-public partnerships as we did before. So there's a really broad spectrum of stakeholders, of formats of partnerships. We are trying to provide information to and try to explain what it is all about. In addition, the partnership actors and the stakeholders, they come from different sectors, from different levels. They are researchers, they are from industry, and they are from project management agencies, ministries. So the spectrum is very, very broad, which means that the information we are providing is targeted to many people, and which is also therefore broad. That means that sometimes it is hard to see and find out what kind of information is really targeted to me. Now, in my situation, that I'm here responsible to implementing the co-fund partnership. We have, as I said, also the political level in there. So we are targeting ministries, their political strategies, to support them on that, to provide them with numbers on the partnership that help them to evaluate what it is done there. And as we also saw yesterday, the needs of the partnership actors might shift according to the phase that they are in. 2 years ago, the needs of the actors were completely different maybe than they are today. So that it increases also the information, because there are always newcomers coming in every year or every all the time. And so we have information for newcomers and also more experienced people. Then there is information on Airlearn beyond Horizon Europe. We were out there since the 6th framework program, and especially the information that we had in Horizon 2020 is still relevant, because there are still Airlearn co-funds out there who might need information and support. So the information goes beyond Horizon Europe, and there is of course, a legacy that we are bringing with us that helps us, but it also means that we are still providing this information on our website. What is important to say is that we're always trying to reach out to you and the stakeholders to try to find out what is needed at the moment. What information do you need? What kind of workshop do you need? What are the stakeholders you might want to reach out to? So we would really like to ask you to stay in contact with us. And because this is a giving and taking, what you need, we can only offer to you if we know about it. So this is really a welcome to reach out to you and to tell us what you need. Basically, I said what I'm providing to you is that I took a look at the information that was mostly asked for within the last years, maybe that would be relevant for you, to take a look at what was important, what was helpful for our stakeholders. And I would like to introduce to you where you can find them and how you get them on our website. Here you can see the structure of our website and the different pillars, so to say, as Roland introduced them to you yesterday. And what is very obvious is that the part of the database is the part which is where most of the actors are interested in. So what we have there is the database, the numbers on the partnership networks, on the organizations participating in, what countries are participating, what projects are they doing about the calls here, which is part of their work. So this is no matter of whether it is Horizon Europe funding, Horizon 2020, we have really, really all the networks. We are trying to get them on there, to have them in here, to have a baseline where people, when they are interested in the networks, in the partnerships, can take a look at what is out there. And you can see what is also important is the partnership in a nutshell part, the strategic coordinating process. We have described here the different types of partnership, the portfolio, the history of the partnership. So it's all the basic information that you need to understand the European partnerships as such. Then the news and events are there, information on events like this, news that we are spreading out, and also the support for partnerships part, where you can find information on governance, on implementing joint calls, on the additional activities, what kind of additional activities are out there, which partnerships are doing what. Overall, you can say that the information we provide here is basically information that we can put on our website because we are asking you for examples to give to us. So we are not putting up some theory, but we are going out there and trying to find the model consortium agreements of the partnerships, compare them with each other, and then make a model of that might serve your needs as a partnership, setting up such a model grant agreement. And the same, that is the same for the additional activities, that the overview we are providing here, comparing the additional activities of the different partnerships, explaining them to them, and trying to link it. This is what we are trying to do here. So a general observation when looking at our on the clicks and numbers of visits of our website is that stakeholders rely on Errorlearn to centralize information, that we really manage to and to channel the information provided by other important stakeholders, mostly of course by the European Commission. So then we are providing summaries of this and or the documents, but this functions very well, and we see that the stakeholders are very much connected through us also to other very, very important points of information. On the section partnerships in a nutshell, which I said it's mostly an overview and explanation what partnerships are, what the process is about, what history is behind it, what is the legal base for the partnerships. We saw that the information on FP10 that I have started to provide recently, that stakeholders are very interested in it, not surprisingly. At the moment, but also, as Kathrin yesterday said, it's her favorite image, the partnership portfolio, and it's not surprising that this is also the site on the point on our website where stakeholders are mostly interested in to see and have this partnership portfolio. And it's also, I have to admit, one of the pages where I am very frequently, where I really frequently go, because it helps a lot. And basically, this is our site. This is where we provide a portfolio, and it seems to be very simple. Say, okay, now you have the portfolio, but in principle, if you would like to create synergies, if you would like to know about other formats, who is out there in my format, who is out there in my cluster. So you basically go back there again and again, because it's one of the most important information that we are providing here. And even once science business came up to us asking whether they could use our image in our portfolio. Yes, it seems to be very simple, but it's at the end, it's a very important information, and I'm very sure that once you are there, that you come back to this site very often. Many of you at home are sitting there, of course, with their computers, their laptops, also here in your room. I was thinking about activating you maybe from the come here in the front to try to find that page. But I think this is something you can also do here in the room or at home and try to find, because it's not such a big problem in the end to go to our platform and find our portfolio. The mostly wanted information when you are regarding our database is that the database as such is our core task, one of our core tasks, and one of our core services that we are providing. As I said, it remains the most relevant point of information on networks and for networks. It's information on all the past partnerships and all the current partnerships, no matter of their format and how long they have been existing. We are keeping up also inactive networks, so that you can see who maybe was active in my topic one framework program ago. You can find a list of all the countries that are active there, maps of the countries and organization, and also take a look at the details of the calls when they are happening, and also about the outcomes of these calls when they were finished. This is basically what it looks like, and you can filter these partnerships according to format. You can find all the co-funded partnerships in there. You can find in there when they started, when they will end, who's participating, and then what kind of partners they are, who's the coordinator, how many organizations of the country. So it's so many options to filter these according to the needs and interests, because it is sometimes, maybe if you come from more strategic political perspective, you might want to find out what industry partners are here in these partnerships, then this is a very good option to filter and find out. But on the other hand, you yourself might be interested in finding organizations who participate in co-funds, or what kind of partnerships have been existing in my specific field, so that we have provide this thematic overview of all the past networks and the current networks within that specific field. You can display them according to maybe only a timeline. When was this? All the networks in that field when they were existing, and or per cluster. So you can find only the networks of that topic. So many options to go here. Try to find out. I think it needs some time to get used to it and to get along and really find your way. But it's very useful and worth it to do so. And in the end, don't hesitate to come to us if you are missing any data. Sometimes partnerships come to us and say, there is a call on your website which was cancelled or postponed, or please come to us, because we only have the possibility to keep that database as updated as possible if we are in touch with each other and we know about maybe the mistakes that are in there. And it's not an automatic thing. We are all people behind it, so it's worth it coming to us. Yesterday we started with the topics on governance, which is something that we are providing on our infrastructure within the support for partnerships. And we saw that the agreements, it's not surprising because you have asked for a model consortium agreement also yesterday. We saw so far that the agreements that we are providing the models for that are most attractive for our target group. Also the governance models that we are provided, and Margit yesterday, she showed you the governance models of the partnership. So what we have been doing here is try to collect and try to get an overview of the different co-funded partnerships, what kind of governance models they have, what kind of committees they have in their partnerships, and what functions these models are serving. And this is the information that we are providing here on the website. Also, monitoring evaluation is one of the additional activities that is quite important to show the impact of the partnerships, which is the reason why we are providing the so-called REC toolkit, which is a monitoring and evaluation exercise, and where you can find all the information provided by us on the site. We also have the implementing the call manual for implementing the joint calls. This is one of our first exercises we did when we started actually. Within the circles of the calls, provide information what to do, and I will just give you an impression of that. You saw this exact picture yesterday already from Margit. As I said, we show the common governance structure of the different co-fund partnership on the governance and the examples of good practices, and we are constantly asking the partnerships whether we can communicate also, of course, what they are doing. And I have to say that actors are very open and really give us the chance to provide the material that might also help others. In the part of the where you can find the governance and also the agreements and the legal base, you can find the model for the consortium agreement. Quite easy. If you go there, you can also have a search function with that, where you can find it. And let me just say again that we are doing these exercises by comparing the really existing and elaborated models of the partnerships themselves, and see what was needed by them, what is their basis for putting the consortium together and elaborating such a consortium agreement, which is an important document, of course, for the partnerships. What do they have to consider? What is about the information barriers they have to think about for implementing the joint calls and so on. So you find all this in our model with the options, different options what to think about when you're setting up such ideas and when you have to put together for such an agreement. As I said, we started basically many years ago with our call manual, and you can see the cycle here from what is needed for the implementation, for the preparation of the call until the reporting phase. You can go through all these phases here and see what documents are needed for that. What is the basic what do you have to think about from the Commission side? What are the criteria that you have to consider when implementing such a joint call? And yes, as I said, you can go through the phases, and they will help you to think about most of the things probably that you need when you're setting up this joint call. When we come to the pillar and the structure for the news and events, there is not too much to say. I think we are providing information of our events and providing the news that we are distributing also here. It was very interesting to see that the workshop yesterday and today had really a lot of interests, and I think that many actors were waiting for that to get this information for the implementation of the co-funds. So that was quite interesting to see. Also, the stakeholder forum that we are co-organizing and supporting the Commission on that takes a place again in December is an event that is very welcomed by the stakeholders, and it is. If you cannot go there, there is also always the chance to receive proceedings on what was said, what was agreed on, because it's like throughout the year we are doing workshops and supporting on workshops that are important for the implementation, no matter whether it's on the phasing out of the partnerships, which is a strategy that you have to develop already now within the partnership, whether it's on monitoring. There are many other topics that we are trying to support, and they are happening throughout the year. And if you missed it, it doesn't really mean that you don't have the information, but we are trying to provide proceedings or FAQs of all these workshops, on our website. So it is really helpful to go there, and sometimes you see maybe the documents are 2 or 3 years old, but still they are relevant, and which is why we are still leaving them then in that situation on this website. It is hard to get through our structure if you are not familiar with it, because sometimes you don't really know other things that might be helpful, and if you don't know the structures and just want to have some general information, you can of course just try to get along. But if you know that you're really looking for, of course, the model consortium agreement or other topics like additional activities and so on, we of course have a search function you might want to use. And so with that, I stop here and I would like to invite you, just take the time to go through it, just take the time to find the information, and take the time to come back to us especially. We are always trying to make our website also more accessible, because we know that it is a lot of information, widely spread, and sometimes hard to find. And maybe you don't find exactly what you're needing, and then that's also helpful for us to know. So please provide us with feedback to make that better, and to help you to get the access to the information you need. So thank you very much until here, and if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask.
Thank you, Christiane. The key message: go home, use it, give feedback There is so much interesting and useful information in the airline. But if you don't provide feedback, it will not be improved as you wanted it to improve. This was kind of a warm-up because now we are really need to get our heads spinning and we are going into the details of the financial requirements. I'm really looking forward to this, but be prepared. There is a lot of stuff and detailed stuff, and you need to look at the slides afterwards to digest it. Please welcome, and excuse me for the pronunciation if it's wrong, Dominika Trzaska.
Perfect.
Okay, and Gianmaria Maule.
Perfect.
Good enough, at
Good,
least?
good enough. Good enough.
Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome. As my name is Dominika Trzaska and Gianmaria Maule. Together we work in REABI 2. Maybe just first a disclaimer. So basically this, indeed, because of how the system is organized, the approach may vary from one agency to another to some extent, and the views that we are here providing are with the views of our unit. And maybe now a bit for building our credentials. So we work with cluster 6 mostly. So in cluster 6 we now implement 7 partnerships, and the 8th is under evaluation, 7 co-funding partnerships. And majority of them, as you see, are ongoing. So they are all going through, you see the last column, through the top-ups. For those of you who start their partnerships this year or will start next year, so the next few slides are not that interesting because we will be talking about the specificities of the top-up approach and some consequences of this approach. So just to remind you, the top-up logic is that in consecutive work programs, there is a topic for a partnership in which the partnership plans, usually a call, then receives an award, and call and activities related to this award, this financing, are being implemented. Then a couple of years later, there is another top-up topic, and then next, can I say additional activities, not to confuse with additional activities as non-call activities. So new activities are added, new calls are added, and then again, in a couple of years, again, the top-up process continues with a new topic, and again, new activities, new calls. However, these are not implemented as separate grants. These are added via an amendment to the original grant. So in the end, you end up with one grant agreement, but because of how it was organized, it will still be kind of like sub-strains of the grant with separate budgets and separate activities. Just to let you know that after the award, the original grant goes through the grant preparation phase. However, the top-ups go to amendment preparation phase. And although in principle in Horizon Europe, there's a no-negotiation approach, apart from several exceptions like ethics, etc. For top-ups, for co-funds and their top-ups, the situation is slightly different. There might be some specific requirements from the evaluations. There might be some specific issues that need to be corrected because of the policy importance of the offset grants. And for the grant preparation phase, the usual time to grant applies, so 8 months since call deadline. However, we've seen that it's not always enough for such a complex programs, and quite often they actually needs to have an extension. For the amendment preparation phase, there's no specific timeline, but usually it takes around the same amount of time as preparation of the new grant. Because it's quite a complex amendment, there needs to be important changes to description of action, so Annex 1, some other clauses, maybe adding new beneficiaries, maybe changing status of the beneficiaries, but also a lot of financial changes, so change of Annex 2, the budget table, and change of the maximum grant amount, with some specific clauses being actually activated from our side. And just for those of you who are still in the process of the top-up, the very important thing is that the new combined description of action combines the activities from the first phase and the activities from the second phase. And again, I'm saying phase, but it does not mean first 2 years, second 2 years, and so on. It needs really to be phase connected to the first grant award. So the description of action needs to combine them, but also needs to allow later on to link the activities with the specific monetary award, with the specific work program activities. Because,
Excuse me,
yes,
can you please explain the acronym DOA?
DOA, it's description of action. So
Yeah,
basically, Annex 1 to the grant agreement, description of what you're planning to do.
Yeah.
So as I mentioned, this will be different strands of grants. So you cannot move freely the budget and the activities from one award to another. So basically, initial grant or first top up, they cover the specific activities that were described and evaluated. You cannot move the budget. You cannot fund the activities from a top up with the budget from the original grant. However, we know that the situations are different. So in case you do encounter such a situation, at some point you might need to request an amendment to move the budget between the phases. But these kind of amendments should be exceptional, and they need to be consulted in advance with the project officers. And it also brings another specific issues. We've been already in the situation because some countries accede to Horizon Europe on specific dates, not from the beginning. They are not always eligible to be funded from the program. So that was indeed the case here from the UK or from Switzerland. They are not eligible to be part of the activities funded from the work programs that were published and where the EU grant was evaluated before they acceded to the program. So in case of the UK, they can be funded only from the top-ups that started in 2024. In case of Switzerland, you can add them as beneficiaries as of 2025, but you cannot retroactively add them to activities that were funded and awarded and described in the work programs earlier. So now we go to more financial matters.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Annika. And I make use of your hand, so we'll go through the slides. Thanks. So some of the content that I'm going to explain now has been touched upon yesterday, so it's no big surprise, but nevertheless, probably very relevant and important to reiterate a bit some messages. I'll touch upon the financial aspects mainly, cost eligibility. You know, the work program defines the reimbursement rate, European reimbursement rate that you can get from the European Union, which is typically 30% of the total eligible cost that are charged to the project. How this financing is distributed within the consortia, it is a consortium matter, so it is defined in the consortium agreement, and it is for you to define and to agree with the partners. And yeah, here just to reiterate that, of course, all the rules when it comes to eligibility of cost are to be found in the Horizon Europe program, annotated model grant agreement that explains how costs are intended to be eligible, I mean, how they can be eligible, and if in case of doubt, you should always refer to the annotated model grant agreement. Thank you. So here it was mentioned yesterday during the presentation from our legal service on the eligibility of cost. So as I said, annotated model grant agreement should really be your reference document whenever you have doubts on the eligibility and many other aspects. For partnership, the regime is actual cost, meaning that cost, in order to be eligible, they must be actually incurred by the beneficiary, incurred throughout the action implementation, be declared under the correct budget categories. So subcontracting, we have a dedicated subcontracting category. If it's actual personnel that is working in the action, should be charged under the personnel cost column in your financial statements. Of course, they must be linked to the action objectives, so they must be necessary for the implementation of the action. They must be auditable, so in case of an audit, you should be able to show all the recordings of all the costs that you incurred, everything should be traceable and in line with usual cost accounting practices applicable under national law. For instance, when it comes to employment contracts, it should follow indeed the national law. Be reasonable. Some financial management should always apply, so not to have excessive cost when it comes to what you're procuring for the action. And then if we zoom in a little bit on the financial support of third parties, this is clearly mentioned in Article 6.2 of the Annotated Model Grant Agreement, and you can also complement this with the Annex 5, which is also an annex to the Annotated Model Grant Agreement. That explains, gives the specific rules for FSTP within the framework of partnerships. It is important at that proposal stage, although you have almost all already submitted your proposals, that you clearly explain how the process of cascade costs is taking place throughout the action implementation. And it is important afterwards during the implementation that, of course, you ensure that the rules are respected. So what I just said about the Annotated Model Grant Agreement, Article 6.2, but also the Annex 5, which gives specific conditions, and also the specific conditions that you have decided before signing the grant agreement, because you might want to add certain conditions into the cost that you're going to run, and of utmost importance that you ensure a close follow-up and you don't change the rules throughout the project implementation. Here again, the important message is, in case of doubt, always refer to the project officers in charge of your partnership from the granting authority, because it's, as we know, this reflects, it's a big chunk of your budget, and you want to make sure that the way you're spending the money on FSTP is in line with the rules. So you better check twice than taking initiatives on something you might not have, you might have doubt about. Yes, and then moving on, annual installment, this was touched upon. Here it's just important to mention that there is this novelty now in 2025 work program, where the work program itself not only covers for the budget of 2025, but also forecast the budget for 26 and 27 work program, which means that with the grant agreement that you will be signing, if any, now with the work program 2025, you cover the budget up to until the end of the program, actually, which means that you won't need to there won't be any top-up amendment to be made because of extra budget coming from future work programs within this time frame, which is a big novelty. Now, it's often confused. We call it annual installment because technically this is what it is, but it's not to be confused with the financial flow, so the payment that you receive in the consortium. So those annual installments do not equal annual payments. For how the payments are made, I will explain you on that next slide, but just for you to know that the novelty for you is that you budget all the credits that are available up to the end of the program in your proposals and then in the award that it's signed. But yeah, the distribution of the installments is done in accordance with the rule of the grant agreement on the distribution of fundings, which is indeed my next slide on the financial flows. Here, typically, I mean, the way that money are given to coordinators that then are distributed among the beneficiaries within the consortia are, first of all, coming from a pre-financing that is given upon signature of the grant agreement. This is a percentage of the total grant amount. It depends from granting authority. Typically, the percentage is based on the number of reporting periods that you had foreseen in the action. To be noted that there is a 5% retention of the total grant amount to the mutual insurance mechanism, which is a mechanism which is foreseen for Horizon Europe, and it sets us out a budget that might be used in case of needs if something happens throughout the implementation of the project, for you to know that 5% of the total grant amount is taken aside and is reimbursed with the final payment. So for you to be given if you have enough cost incurred for the action, but it's kept aside and it's only reimbursed at the end. There could be additional pre-financing in case the grant agreement foresees that. The pre-financing amount are based on the consumption of the first pre-financing that was given to you. So the rule says that you should consume at least 70% of the first pre-financing. If that's not the case, then you will be given an amount which is deducted by the budget not consumed from the first pre-financing. Here it's very relevant for you to know that FSTP, so all the money that you have committed with the final recipients are also considered, although not yet distributed, are considered as consumed if you have committed those, budgetary speaking, accounting speaking, if you have committed that amount for the final recipient. So that counts for the 70% calculation on consumption, budget consumption. Then you have interim payments that follow the reporting periods. Those are based on the cost claims that you declare and submit, with the limitation of a capping of 90%. So you won't ever receive reimbursement over 90% of the total maximum grant amount, because there is always 10% remaining that is given with the final payment. So with the last reporting period at the end of the action, when the costs are checked. And then I think I can move to my last slide. Here is just to mention the certificate on financial statement. This is just to say that this is something that you need to budget within your, consider in your budget. Those costs are going to be due, and you need to submit a certificate on financial statements only at the end of the project if the total maximum, the total incurred your requested contribution at beneficiary level equals or exceeds 430,000 euros. So in that case, this is a certificate for which you can find a template in the participant portal that has to be filled in, prepared by an independent external auditor, or in case of public bodies, there are some derogation where it can be also a public officer, provided that they can differentiate. Indeed, this is foreseen in your organization, and I think this is it from my side. Back to you.
Yes. So now we go again about monitoring and reporting for the partnership. So firstly, the reporting periods. Usually, let's say the standard approach would be that reporting periods for partnerships are every 24 months. However, due to specificities of the action, due to some needs and asks and some extra constraints, sometimes they might be longer, especially, for example, for periods that not much happens. For example, during the first initial grant, when there's just one call, we would have initially usually have a very long first period, and then very long periods in between when there was basically just expectation of follow-up of the task projects. Such reporting periods can be changed during the top-up amendment or during a specific amendment if there's a need. And again, just to let you know that shift to annual installments per se does not impact the reporting calendar or payment schedule. The partnerships can have reviews with external experts. Such reviews can be done together with the end of reporting period, but they can also be done without a reporting period on a different schedule. And as Gianmaria mentioned, the payment modalities that you can expect are pre-financing and cost reimbursement, either or. Usually the pre-financing regime tends to stay till the last top-up for those of you who have partnerships with top-up grants. During the follow-up and monitoring and reporting, there are several mandatory elements. This includes, as described in AGA in Annex 5, some deliverables related to FSTP, so call conditions, rank list of proposals, observer reports. This for the partnerships, it includes annual expenditure deliverables if the reporting periods are longer than 18 months, which pretty much always the case, and deliverables or sometimes milestones related to data transfer regarding your cascade funded projects, and annual work plans. And annual work plans are the very specific deliverables because they really have to be assessed and approved every year. However, for the other mandatory or non-mandatory deliverables, they might be reviewed when you submit them, but in some cases, some of them will be only reviewed together with the report or together with the review at the end of reporting period. Then important things when you prepare your deliverables, you really need to ensure that the cascade costs are conducted in line with the general FSTP rules and the specific conditions of the grant agreement, as Gianmaria mentioned. If you put specific eligibility conditions, for example, or in your grant agreement, you need to stick to whatever you put in your grant agreement. And then the evaluation must use the same award criteria as Horizon Europe calls. So excellence, impact, implementation. The specificities would depend on the specificities of the actions that you are funding. So usually it would be RIA, so Research Innovation Action, or IA, Innovation Action, not co-funds rather. Then, and as was mentioned before, the budget cannot be moved between top-ups. So each work program funds activities evaluated under this work program. That's an amendment, but as was already mentioned, as of 25, everything else is treated as one top-up. So 25, 26, 27 here, the budget is freely movable between those activities that are evaluated under the last phase. And again, just a small reminder, non-compliance with the mandatory rules or specific aspects of your grant agreements for a given partnership can lead to cost rejections. So if in doubt, if you're not sure, check up front with your project officer, ask if this way of doing things is correct and if it would not create a problem. Again, for the non-call activities, so-called additional activities, we don't say in-kind contributions because that's something else defined in the financial regulation and in the grant agreement. So these are any activities that are not financial support to third parties, in-house activities, internal research, access to data, monitoring, training programs, dissemination, communication activities. And there's no predefined list of activities. They just need to fit for under the eligible costs listed in the grant agreement. So purchase costs, personnel, etc. And again, depending on the specificity of the topic of the partnership, some of you will have more and some of you will have less possibility to do such activities because original work program defines how big an emphasis on these additional activities would be, and this is indeed reflected in the reimbursement rate. So 30% default reimbursement rate for partnerships that are mostly focused on the financial support to third parties, and in some cases 50% when we would expect that there will be more additional activities included. And then maybe just for a small reminder, because it was already touched upon yesterday, that some obligations are extended not only to the beneficiaries of the partnerships, but also to the beneficiaries of the cascade funding, so to your grants to FSTP recipients. And one of such obligations is, for example, ethics. So it is all described in Article 19 of Horizon Europe regulation and in Article 14 of the grant agreement. Again, please read the grant agreement whenever in doubt. So basically, all actions need to comply with ethical principles and with EU and national and international laws. There are some specificities about need to be able to do ethics assessment, to ensure that activities are allowed in at least one member state, to provide licensing and approvals. And for compliance, the proposals need to be screened. If there are human embryonic stem cells, they will need to go for an ethics assessment. And then they need to obtain all the approvals needed for the research. And in some cases, there might be checks as for the commission or the funding body. with ethics experts. And again, non-compliant actions might be rejected or terminated. So basically, what does it mean in practice? It means that you, as co-fund partnership consortium, must ensure that also FSTP recipients will respect those obligations, that they will keep full documentation, they will be able to demonstrate compliance during ethic-related checks or reviews or any other, and that there will be a monitoring scheme for FSTP actions, and if there is an ethics assessment, that will be something that via you they would inform the Commission, and if there's any prohibited activity, such proposal would not be funded by you. And again, non-compliance with ethics may lead to ineligible costs. So it is recommended strongly and often already asked during the grant agreement preparation to appoint an ethics board that would assist you in setting the review mechanism for the cascade funding projects, and to assist you in understanding all the ethics issues relevant for you and for your projects. So this concludes. This concludes our presentation, but I cannot move the time.
Yes.
Did it work? No, I think
Further guidance, it moved.
yes. No, it moved in the wrong direction, I think. So you already seen the slides with the further guidance. So if in any doubts, please consult, and grant agreement should be your Bible, and your project officer should be your main interlocutor in case of any doubts. So please reach to them in advance if you have any doubts, not after.
Thank you. I was informed this morning that we also have the legal representative team from RTD online. From the legal team, do you want to add anything to what we heard from Rihanna?
No. I think that the presentation was comprehensive, so nothing to add from my side.
Good. Then we turn to maybe this time we start with the online audience. Do we have any questions that we would like to present now?
Yeah, there's 2 questions. So the first one is, does the interim payment only take place at the end of the process and before there are only pre-financing installments? That's the first question. And the second one is there no lump sum available in the HE?
I think I can take both. So no, so for interim payments are foreseen for the project implementation. So there is normally one pre-financing only, and then the rest is based on reporting periods. So at the end of each reporting period, there is an interim payment. So at the end of the reporting period, you submit your financial statements. Those are assessed, the cost eligibility is checked, and then the result of it is a payment, interim payment, that is given to the coordinator. So if we take a simple example of a project with 3 reporting periods only, not really reflecting the reality of partnerships, perhaps, you have a pre-financing at the beginning. At the end of the first reporting period, you have an interim payment. At the end of the second reporting period, you have an interim payment, a second interim payment. And then with the last reporting period, you will receive a final payment depending on the eligibility, of course.
However, indeed, in case of partnerships, you can have, let's say, reporting period that finishes with additional pre-financing. So indeed, there are some cases like that. We have 2 different approaches. So either during the top-ups, you cannot have cost claims and cost reimbursements. So basically, for some partnerships, the first reporting period is actually prolonged, and there might be adjustments to the pre-financing with the top-up, and also sometimes a review that's not linked to the end of reporting periods. And for another, there is a mini reporting period. It's not really mini, but it's because it's connected to pre-financing and not to the cost reimbursement payment. Then it's connected to slightly lighter reporting. So basically, you do not report on the financial issues, and then you receive a second pre-financing based on the fact on the consumption of the first pre-financing. So there are two different approaches that we're trying to see which one works better and which one makes life easier for you. So we're just testing it.
Yeah.
And then for the lump sum?
And then for the lump sum, no, indeed, there is no lump sum there is a lump sum available for Horizon Europe. That was the question. So technically, yes. However, for partnerships, the regime is based on actual costs. So this is why costs have to be checked, and you need to report and account for them in your accounting.
Okay. So for the on-site audience, anyone that have specific questions? Yeah. Barbara, please. Yeah.
So on one, you are showing this way of reimbursing costs after reported periods, but you say that the partnership needs to spend a certain amount of the cost, 70%, to be reimbursed. And how does this go along with, because the 70% rate, if
No. So so the 70% is based on the amount of the first installment of pre-financing that you receive. So the first pre-financing is based on a percentage over the total amount. Can be, for instance, 40% of the total grant amount. That's the pre-financing. Now, if your grant agreement had foreseen a second installment of pre-financing after 2 years, for instance, in order to get the percentage that was foreseen for the second pre-financing, you need to show that you have consumed 70% of the first pre-financing. If not, you would still get a payment, but it would be based on the percentage, on the amount that was defined in the grant agreement, minus the amount that it was not consumed that had to be used to reach the 70%. Of course, as I said, FSTP commitments are also embedded. So it's, if there is a call organized, most likely you would exceed the 70% already, because it's, although you haven't paid final recipient yet, if you commit the amount that you're going to be used only for FSTP, then this accounts for 70% consumption.
Also, maybe I'll just add that usually this additional pre-financing and adjustment to pre-financing only concern the partnerships that go through the top-up procedure, because then when you till we reach the maximum grant amount foreseen throughout the early negotiations, we cannot change into the regime of interim payments with the cost claim reimbursement. And if I remember correctly, you were just planning.
yes,
So you will be probably just having just one pre-financing, and afterwards you would go into the regime of cost reimbursement.
But the costs are both financial supports for third parties and the commission top-up, which goes to calls and to other activities. And there are own funds. So I understand that the 70% concerns the total of all those costs. So in-kinds, own costs, commission,
so
payments,
FSTP and additional activities, yes, and it's reimbursed with afterwards it will be reimbursed with normal 20% or 50% rates.
So there is no distinction between what is reimbursed by the EU or not. It's really on the total cost foreseen for the action. All payments are based on your estimate of costs based on the budget that you have, that we just signed for the grant agreement. So based on that, if you consume that 70% of the first installment, then you will get the second installment. But as Nika said, the multiple pre-financing was used in the situation that we faced until now in partnership, where we didn't have the flexibility of annual installments. Now that we have this flexibility, meaning that for the calls now that are closing, you reflect the budget until the end of the program, you include everything in your budget. Therefore, there is no need of having multiple pre-financing, because then you would just take it interim payment one by one. So in that sense, it would be not concerned in principle with that.
And maybe here just to complement that, of course, the 30% would be reimbursement for the full cost, but how you kind of then use this money and where you put the commission share and where you put the national funders share, that's the internal cuisine of the decision.
Good. There was one question. Yeah.
Good morning. Thank you so much for all the insights shared. They're very precious. I have a question about the retroactive starting date, because we haven't started yet. We are supposed to be the first partnership under Cluster 2, and I have to admit that these 8 months that have been mentioned between the call deadline and the actual ending of the grant agreement preparation phase, that might not be enough. They seem quite a challenge. So how does this work in practice? And maybe some colleagues that have experienced this in their partnerships can share, because there's going to be a lot of work to be done, especially on the coordination side of this. So how can we play these afterwards? How does this work in practice? Thank you.
In practice, and you decide during the in practice, then both for new partnerships and actually for the activities related to the top-up, you need to discuss it during the grant agreement or amendment preparation agreement phase with your project officer. And in many cases, yes, indeed, we expect the retroactive starting date. The retroactive starting date cannot be earlier than the call deadline, that's for sure. But otherwise, yes, it's possible, and it's often the case to align with, for example, with the calendar of national funders. So yes, it happens, but case by case basis. So you need to discuss it during the preparation phase with your.
So you're saying that it can start right after the call deadline?
In principle, yes, but usually, I mean, but that would be quite a long retroactive date.
Yeah,
so
yeah,
usually,
of course, but just to know the.
Yes, it cannot start before, but usually it's several months after the call deadline, after the evaluation results, and at least but yes, quite often it's, for example, January the 1st. So
thank
you. Good. You next.
Thank you so much for your presentation. And I have 2 questions and 1 thank you, because in the Agroecology Fund we had this problem that we had not yet spent some financial support to third parties, or we had just started to grant research projects. We could not use that part to prove that we had used 70% of pre-financing. It created problems in some areas, so I see that things are getting better. That's excellent. Thank you. So my first question is, at which point of time is the additional pre-financing paid? Is it after the evaluation of the proposal, hopefully positive, or only once the amendment related to that is paid? And the second one, I will take one example. Let's admit 100 million euro maximum grant amount. So, and 40% pre-financing, quite usual. Then 40 million euro pre-financing, but we receive 35 million because 5 million euro are set aside for the mutual insurance mechanism. Does the 70% threshold apply to the 40 million euro or to the 35 million euro? So to the really received money or to the pre-financing total?
Yeah, makes sense.
So you take the second question. Yeah. So for the first question, indeed, the pre-financing payment will be triggered only after the amendment is signed, because the amendment will change the maximum grant amount, and this will trigger the pre-financing. If it's an adjustment for the pre-financing, if it's, however, the second pre-financing, this would need both an amendment and end of reporting period. So there are some small differences in the setup. You're with agroecology, so I believe that in your case that would be triggered by the amendment. I think that we prolong the reporting period, the first reporting periods to accommodate the setup.
Yeah, it got me there because I'm not 100% sure. So I think we can get back on this one. I will just double check and then we can confirm. Logically speaking, it would be on the amount that you received and not on the actual formal pre-financing amount. So not excluding the 5% retention, but I need to double check this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, so thank you very much. Did I understand you right, Dominika, that you were saying that there are exceptional cases that budget can be shifted between the different amendments and the different parts of these three phases that we as a partnership have? Because we have been told that under no circumstances can be 1 cent be shifted between. And I would like to understand if that's somehow possible and what cases that would be.
I mean, it's not possible to shift it just like that between the. Yeah. However, in exceptional cases, there might be an amendment to discuss with the budget shift. But that will be again exceptional and vis-a-vis your agency team and depending on the circumstances.
What case would that be?
Again, case by case basis. I'm not really in the situation to comment on the specific partnership situations if I don't know all the details.
Just as outsider on that, what is the sort of deciding body and who is sort of making such a final decision on that? It's up to the agency to decide, or is it sort of scaled to other levels, or how is it?
Yeah, it is the granting authority, so yeah. The entity with whom the grant agreement is signed, so the executive agencies. So this is, it's of course the project officers represent the granting authority, but it's of course the final decision is taken by the granting authority, which is normally of course based on the rules that are.
And we have another question.
Yes. Good morning. Thank you for your precious presentation. I don't understand about the mutual insurance mechanism. I would like to understand if there is any documents or any article in the grant agreement about this mechanism. How is the rules on basis of this mechanism? There is any document to deepen this aspect?
Yeah, this is, you can find it also mentioning in the annotated model grant agreement, the existence of this mutual insurance mechanism. It is a mechanism that was first thought, I mean, it comes from the former, also from FP7, there was something. It is a bit less relevant in the context of partnership because normally in partnership there are only public entities involved, but it's meant to set aside an amount that is then, of course, it remains a part of the pre-financing, but just only given at the end of the final payment. And this is kept aside in case of issues happening throughout the project implementation. So in a case where, for instance, there is in the program, the action, one entity that is private and suddenly goes bankrupt, and this entity received 40% upfront of pre-financing, and this amount is not going to go back to the consortium because they are bankrupt, and there is a debt in the consortium. Then the mutual insurance mechanism can be triggered, and it can, under certain conditions, give this money that were lost in the consortium back to the consortium to continue the action. This is a bit why it exists and it's there. So it's actually to protect consortium because we don't ask in Horizon Europe for bank guarantees, which means that, and all beneficiaries are not liable vis-a-vis each other. So in case one of the beneficiaries in the consortium goes bankrupt, the other beneficiary does not need to pay for that beneficiary. This is why the name exists.
I'll keep you in the spotlight. A couple of more questions if we have. It's okay with you.
Thank you for this meeting. Just to be sure, referring to additional activities, I got that we don't have to call them in-kind contribution. but I hardly understand the reason why. It's something some activity you can effort, but without sort of actual cost. You just it seems to me exactly like in kind activities. But if I get your suggestion, it's just that we don't have to use the term, just an issues about term, or there is some reason I missed.
So, okay, so partnership work within the Horizon Europe Annotated Model Grant Agreement that specifies the terminology of in-kind contribution as any non-financial resources put at the disposal of beneficiaries from third parties. So it can be that you are given personnel to work for your institution for free by another entity. This is considered in-kind contribution, so seconded staff that comes to work for us. What the grant agreement allows for is that in case of in-kind contribution free of charge, because they are given for free, you can still in your action, in your reporting, cover the cost of this seconded staff that is given for you for free. This is what we refer to when we talk about in-kind contribution. The specificity is only made on free of charge type of in-kind contribution. Any other type of in-kind contribution against payment that used to be called against payment under Horizon H2020, which is indeed, I give you some personnel, but of course, I'm reimbursed for the use of this personnel, then this is just charged to the project, as if in the case of seconded staff, you would report it as staff in your organization, because indeed they are contributing to the action, they are working as staff, so they are under the same conditions as your staff. And you just report the cost in your. For the additional activities, I mean, all the activities that are foreseen within the grant agreement that are specified, those contribute, of course, to the total cost that you're allowed to get reimbursed for. So maybe we shouldn't focus too much on terminologies, but you should take the picture of you have activities that are foreseen signing the grant agreement. Those activities, as long as they are in line with the eligibility condition, as we mentioned, they are eligible, and therefore you get reimbursed. I mean, you get the reimbursement rate out of the total cost up to the maximum grant amount decided in the award decision.
But it depends on the definition, and just on the definition of the grant agreement, the definition of in-kind. That's why
Yes, I wouldn't even stress too much about it, in the sense that you consider costs. Be it in kind or not, those are costs that you incur throughout your action, and those costs, as long as they are pertinent for the action and happening within the action as per the conditions, then they are eligible, and then you can get reimbursement.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. I think we take one more question before we move on, and then we have the Q&A session afterwards as well. So,
now, because the others want to stay in, and then they are going to.
Okay, yeah.
Okay. I will be brief. Thank you. Nathalie van der Heyden, Partnership on Animal Health and Welfare. I had just a question, because we have two kinds of activities, so FSTP and additional activities. And our additional activities program is very large. And so I wonder if there is an equilibrium between the two, because for REA, the budget as a whole is considered, but we have to declare FSTP costs and internal activities costs. But imagine that the FSTP costs are not as high as they should have been, for instance, because funders do not invest as much as they promise, and the additional activities increase. Is it possible to oversee a kind of balance compared to the initial budget plan? Because at the end, it's all eligible costs, and I mean, it's impossible to predict exactly what the funders will invest and what the additional activities will cost. So I hope that there is a balance possible, an equilibrium, that can be formed as long as we don't go over the budget, of course, the total budget, but that if the funders do not invest as much, then the RPO, in our case, the research organization can have more costs. You see what I mean? So and I don't know if there is no real rules about that. So
that would again be case.
So
that would again be case by case basis, and although indeed the cost would be as such eligible, the balance between would also depend on the topic. So basically, if you're one of the main reasons for the partnership existence is actually cascade funding, so you cannot scale it down too much, right? And obviously, any specific situation would need a discussion, maybe, and checking because and an amendment, and would need not to call into doubt the awards. So basically, it's like if you want to change the projects too much, then it's not always possible because it cannot. If overall what we accept as an amendment is something that would not change the granting decision. So that's always case by case basis.
thank you very much.
Any more questions from the on-site audience? Yes.
One more question related to financial support to third parties, because you said that costs are seen as incurred at the moment of signature of contracts. So when they don't have to be paid out, but they are already contracted. Yes, did I?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's this paragraph here in the video.
Yes, but what happens if at the end of the project, for example, partners don't spend all the money, or I don't know, there is a problem, so a contract is not finished? How do you, so do you then correct the incurred costs? Because in the end, we've paid out less than initially planned in the contract. This happens very often in research projects that we get back a certain amount which was not spent by the consortium. How do you?
Yeah, so here you're referring to this installment of second pre-financing. So this is based on costs that ideally are going to be given to the consortia that are needed for the consortia to incur cost in the future. Now, there is this rule of the 70%. As long as in accounting terms, you have blocked this amount, this commitment for the use of final recipient, then we consider them as committed, and therefore they account for the 70% calculation. It may happen that in the end, something happens and they are not going to be given anymore. So of course, you have consumed less, but this is going to be reflected in the subsequent reporting period, because then during the interim payment reporting period, you will need to declare all the costs that you've incurred, among which you would also need to, report on the FSTP. And if you reported less, this would be visible in the interim payment. And of course, the reimbursement that you get out of the interim payment would be lower depending on the use that you made of the FSTP.
So these issues are taken care of in the final reporting or at the end of
throughout the project. So throughout the interim payment. So if you have a call that should be over by within a reporting period, then the cost can be covered by the reporting period. If you in the end consume less, spend less, you would report less, and this would be already covered by the reporting period interim payment.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, okay, one more, yeah.
Yeah.
Or maybe a comment.
May I ask a practical question? Because when I look in the grant management service of some project which has had a top-up amendment, I only see one project. So I guess there will be only one financial statement and one reporting. So how do you want to, how will you compare the budget phases? How will you do that in practice? Is it in the PDF, which we have to upload in the period report, or how is it working in practice?
How it will work in practice, we will see, because we will be receiving, starting to receive that report, this kind of reports relatively soon. However, for the narrative part of the reporting. So for the PDFs, yes, we would expect that that you would be indicating how the separate tranches were spent, indeed. And that's why also it's important when preparing the top-up amendment to ensure that the activities can be linked to a specific budgetary tranche. So basically, either by assigning them a new work package, a new task number, maybe marking in some specific way in the description of action. So then you can connect the activities with the budget. So, however, how detailed this is, this will be to be considered and seen.
Okay, may I add one more question? Because that means that I report for, let's say, 3 phases, but it's I combine it in one financial statement. This is correct, or not?
Yeah, normally you're given only one financial statement indeed. Then how you would report on the costs, so on the breakdown of costs for the financial statement, it would depend on what's the requirement from the contracting authority, because this is a bit also new to us. We do not have a template per se that foresees the split of depending on the phases when it comes to cost reporting, but it might very well be that you should know which cost you have incurred for which phase, and it might be that the contracting authority asks you for this breakdown. Here again, I wanted to mention about the disclaimer that Nika showed at the beginning, because here we represent one unit within REA, but of course, things might change depending on the unit. I mean, the underlying assumption is the same, rules are the same, but some specificities might change depending on your contracting authority or the unit that you're working with. So one of which would be also the reporting of costs, because as you said correctly, there's one financial statement where you cover the entire cost for the reporting period. Now, it might be indeed that you would need to then indicate, for instance, in the narrative, in the core report, what was the split of the cost, not going perhaps into the details of disclosing all the costs, of course, but to give indication on what are the amounts per which phase. But again, depending on what the requirement is from the unit you're working with.
Good, thank you. We do have more questions. Okay.
Can you follow up on that?
Oh yeah, one. Yes, please go ahead.
I'm super surprised by what you're saying, although I like it a lot. We get an entirely different information, right? We are obliged, based on information from our project officer, to not only provide the sum of across all the amendments that we have, but on the cent on the different phases. So it does not matter that there is just one grant agreement with different amendments. We need to be super specific and very accurate on the level of whatever detail, which costs occur to the first, the second, and the third phase. And you're saying entirely different things. And it would be super helpful if you agree among the agencies how to run this, because this is not fair that we need to sit down to put this in all the small little boxes. Others just don't do that. And I'm really lost here how this is to be managed across the agencies, right?
Sure, I get the frustration, but I mean, it's not one single body running at all. I mean, it depends also.
And agree on the terms of that.
But it's quite complex, and there might be specificities, things that we don't. We have the right of asking a report that goes to the SANS. So what they are doing, it's correct. They have the right to ask for it. There may be reasons why they are doing that I miss. So I cannot speak on their behalf, the reason why they go to that level of detail. There might be reasons that indeed I'm not aware of. So you can, of course, talk to them, see if you can find an agreement on whether you can make it a bit more lighter in a way, so that you can, because of course we are talking about a lot of cost, and Horizon Europe is, I mean, the principle of Horizon Europe is that there is a mutual trust in the sense that we don't ask for disclosure of the entirety of cost in general terms, because the rules says that we should only disclose costs that exceed 15%. There is a specific rule on the detailed of cost. And of course, the granting authority can always ask for the entirety of cost, which anyway you need to show in case you have an audit. It's anyway your obligation to know how much you have incurred to the cent, because in case of an audit, you must.
Of course, we do that.
Exactly. So that.
But it makes a difference if we are summing it up at the end and claiming these are the costs that we have for a couple of years, or if you for every reporting phase that there is over the 12 years plus that we are running, right? Every year, every other year, there's a couple of reporting phases. If we have to split that in detail for 3 different subcontracts or not. This is a huge amount. If we are 60 plus partners, this is a multi-million endeavor. So it makes a difference on our resources that we need to make this reporting. And seriously, I do not understand why it does not matter for RIA and it does matter for another agency if you split it up or not. Either this is important and necessary or it is not important or necessary.
No,
so I really would like to get an understanding of the framework based on the commission.
I think there's like misunderstanding there. I mean, we will need to provide a global cost statement that covers everything, but there will be splits. It's just that the level of detail in the split might differ from the one agency to another. However, you will need to provide a split per the tranche per the top up, let's say. So as you say, 3 phases, and maybe some will ask for every single item, some will ask for personal costs. But overall, yes, that's also the case in the normal projects. Usually there is a level of detail common throughout the agencies, but in some cases you might be asked to provide more and extra details. That's the granting authority's possibility, and some are using it more, some are using it less, but indeed you will need to provide the splits per different costs, per split, so it can be compared with the budget provided at the specific tranche.
Good. Thank you.
May I, sorry, is this possible to ask?
Yeah, we open for more questions, but I think this topic is something that we need to deal with in another forum, so that we can sort of focus on what you can answer to now. But do you have more questions?
Just one, but this is connected to that.
Yeah.
Sorry, but I guess when you have only one financial statement and you have only one certificate on the financial statement, which the auditor has to do for us. So normally you can report it at the end of the project or each.
Only at the end.
Yes, you can do it annually, but you have to deliver the statement at the end, or you do it for the whole period. But it's one on one financial statement or not on the split, I guess. This it's clear or not? Yeah.
Yeah, it's one certificate on financial statement that has to be provided for the entirety of the duration of the project and all the costs per beneficiary.
Yeah.
I don't see any more questions from the on-site audience. We do have a number of questions have arrived online, but I think most of them haven't been answered either sort of.
Yeah, so there have been questions online and they have been answered either by Gianmaria or by the legal team. So they're all accessible on the team. So if you want to go through them, I think it's easier to read them by yourselves if you're interested.
Before we close this part, are there any comments from the legal team that is following online? Do you want to make any comments or final remarks?
No, I think that the presentation was very good. The replies were convincing, I hope, and for the difference in the implementation of the payments and the level of details. Yes, this is something that may differ from agency to agency, but we will try to take care of it and to discuss internally to make it as equal as possible.
Yeah, Thank you. I think this was super interesting, super useful, and not at least for all those that are going to now enter this phase. So thank you again very much. Big applause.
Okay, so for the online participants, I was muted, obviously. I was already saying that I'm going to present some background information in terms of the flexibility that the consortia have in the context of financial arrangements, while of course the legal framework is not negotiable. To start with some basic information, and of course I'm repeating things that have been said already. There's a fixed funding rate that's defined in the grant agreement. Typically that's 30% for co-funded partnerships. And this triggers an EU contribution, which is generated by eligible costs, and it will be the same cost categories as in any other Horizon Europe project. We've also seen already that there's usually two types of activities that partnerships implement. It's a call for proposals using financial support to third parties, and on the other hand, it's additional activities, which covers anything that's not a joint goal, basically. So anything different from financial support to third parties. EU contribution is based on reported costs, not on any estimated costs. So the payments really need reported eligible costs. And then the Commission pays to the coordinator, and the coordinator distributes the funding to consortium members. And how this distribution takes place is defined in the consortium agreement. So the consortium agreement gives you some flexibility when it comes to when, how, etc. you want to distribute the EU contribution. And this also gives you the flexibility to deviate from the fixed funding rate that is defined in the grant agreement, depending on needs by the individual networks. The reason for that is that some activities may benefit from different funding rates. So depending on what you're actually doing, you want to consider a funding rate that deviates from the fixed 30%. For example, you could decide that you have a cost or activities that's worth a 100% reimbursement. Also, when it comes to activities that benefit the entire consortium or are predominantly done by a few participants for the entire consortium, which reimburses also their higher efforts. And on the other hand, you could also decide to have a flexible approach to the distribution of funding in the context of the joint calls to balance available national funding and actual demand. How do you do this? You can decide internally to have different funding rates defined in the consortium agreement. You could say we will have more than 30% for this and less than 30% for that. Erlen provides a model consortium agreement. We have assembled a template on the basis of the Trzaska model that's available on our website. And the model has been adapted to the partnership needs, in particular in the sections listed here, covering, for example, governance structure, financial provisions, and core implementation. So this is, I guess, one of the more valuable resources available on our website, and we know that it's well appreciated. In this consortium agreement, we have a few suggestions. First of all, we suggest to keep things as simple as possible. You may have realized from discussion this morning and also yesterday that things are already quite complex, so you don't want to add further complexity to this. So keep it as simple as possible. and design the internal reporting along the lines of the reporting to the Commission. So we've also seen some approaches where there were some additional categories introduced, but be very careful with what you're doing. When it comes to adapting the funding rates, as I said, you could decide to have different funding rates for different activities, but also for different cost categories, higher reimbursement of personal costs, for example, or lower reimbursement of FSTP. You could also say certain work packages or types of activities demand a different funding rate. One recommendation that we also give is the reserve fund that you should foresee. So be aware that things may not turn out as expected in real life. So in the end, you could end up with a situation where you actually receive less money from the Commission than originally expected. And instead of collecting contributions from the consortium afterwards, it's better to have a reserve fund foreseen at the beginning. And you could also decide on core activities or some nice to have activities when it comes to prioritizing the use of EU contribution. I'm now going to present three different cases or approaches to this flexibility. We'll have some tables with numbers. First of all, differentiating funding rates between types of categories. Then we'll see different funding rates in joint cohorts for different beneficiaries. This is about the gap filling. And then you could also merge the two previous approaches and have some more flexibility in terms of cost categories and share of FSTPs. So you have a table here in which you see in the upper table the 30% funding rate applied to all cost categories. So that's the theoretical approach. Everything's treated the same way. And then in the lower table, you see that the scenario is slightly different in the sense that there's a 100% funding rate for all cost categories except the FSTP. So you see in the three categories on top of the table, personal cost, subcontracting, and purchase, you see a 100% EU contribution. But then in the FSTP, you see a lower contribution than in the table above. And in the indirect cost, you see no contribution at all. So this is an example how you could decide to distribute the EU funding. Of course, if you decide to have a 100% reimbursement of personal costs, for example, and at the same time you decide to use less EU contribution for the FSTP, you need to replace this lacking EU contribution with your own funds, because in the end, the amount has to stay the same. So to illustrate this, you see the share of EU funding and national funding in these two bars, in this bar chart. You see how the EU funding and the national funding differ from one scenario to the other, depending on which funding rate you apply. So in one case, you use more funding, more EU funding for additional activities and less for the course, but then you need to invest more at the national level into the course. It's important not to mix up the two approaches. So in the end, as I said, you need to report the original amount that emerges from the theoretical approach. What you should not do is confuse the two tables and in the end report less than what you should report, because that will result in less EU contribution. So be very careful which numbers to use when reporting to the Commission. Okay, so you're actually reporting the theoretical values and not the internally decided amounts. The second approach that I'm presenting is the different funding rates for different beneficiaries in the joint cohorts. This comes with the variation of demand in the cohorts. You have committed budgets at the national level and you have requested funding at the national level. There's never a perfect match. Usually there's a wide variation of demanded budget, and typically there will be gaps in the funding list. And in order to fill these gaps, you could decide to set aside some of the EU contribution as a flexible pot to fill gaps and to extend the funding list according to real needs. So this is nothing new. This has been done in the co-fund course many times before. Just to illustrate how this is done, you have a list of projects, you have a budget at the national level, and in this table here, the red boxes show you when agencies run out of money and what that does to your funding list. Whenever somebody has no money, they will block the list, and this shouldn't happen because it will mean less spending at the consortium level and less funding received from the Commission. In this example, you will fund 3 projects, whereas if you spend the EU contribution where needed, you could extend your list to a much larger number of funding projects. In this case, you wouldn't be able to fund the rest of the selection list. Now, of course, if you invest the budget where it is needed, this will result in different funding rates or different contributions to different beneficiaries. Instead of a 30% funding rate for everybody, some beneficiaries will end up with a lower funding rate or top-up rate, whatever you call it, and others with a higher percentage. As I said, this has been tested in practice many times before. This is widely used. Just to clarify what this means, some beneficiaries will get less than expected and others will get more than expected, but as a whole, the consortium will make sure to spend as much as possible. So that's the main reason and the main motivation. It's a win for everybody. Okay, and then you could decide to merge both approaches. You could have different funding rates per cost categories or per activities, and you could also decide to have this flexible use of EU contribution to fill gaps in the selection list. And this will, of course, lead to a further difference in funding rates for beneficiaries. And here's a larger table in which you see what this means. You see in the yellow line at the bottom the funding rates for the cost categories that are internally decided, with the 100% funding rate for all cost categories except for FSTP, which is in practice at 21% in this example, and 0% for the indirect costs. So this would be the example that we've seen at the beginning. And at the same time, you have this flexible approach to the joint course, which leads to different contributions to different beneficiaries. And in the end, the overall result would be that some beneficiaries receive much more than others. But in the end, if that leads to a higher spending at the consortium level, it will also lead to a higher EU contribution, which which benefits the entire consortium. In any case, the table below is not the one that you report to the Commission. You report the one at the top, because that's the values that the Commission really needs to trigger the contribution. The table below is just for interim use. There's some lessons learned. Obviously, the more you know, the better it will go with implementation. Make sure everybody's familiar with reporting rules, starting with the basics such as timesheets, but also when it comes to what to report and how the payment is calculated, etc. Make sure that all the costs are eligible, defined in the annual work program, and so on. I've already talked about the simplicity that should be targeted and the precise rules defined in the consortium agreement. Of course, the flexibility applies to every single network. Whatever you want to implement, whatever you need is a basis for your approach. So what could be good for one network may not be appropriate for the other one. Yeah, the FSTPs that you report in the respective cost category would be the total amount. So it's not the EU contribution that you report the entire amount on which basis the EU will calculate its contribution. And something that is highly recommended is the close monitoring at the consortium level in order to have a very good idea about the project budget at all times. So don't just check tables whenever you report to the Commission. Make sure you have some real-time monitoring in order to detect any deviations as soon as possible. You're not going to spend all the money committed to calls and so on and so forth. Make sure you do some real-time calculations to know exactly what to expect. Yeah, and I've already recommended the reserve fund for any unexpected situations. Thank you for your attention, and I recommend the material that we provide on the website. Thank you.
So we then go to the next parts. Yeah, we have Nicolas Tinois that will present how do we finance our partners. From you represent Agroecology, please.
Thank you for the introduction and for the invitation. I'm going to present a concrete example, a little bit of what Roland just presented. So my name is Nicolas. I'm working at Project Management Unit in Germany, and together with colleagues of mine, we are coordinating this partnership on accelerating farming system transition, agroecology living labs, and research infrastructures on behalf of the German Federal Ministry for Agriculture, Food, and Regional Identity, to the name recently. So we have also a co-coordinator, which is France Agence Nationale de la Recherche. So I'm going to speak about the phase 1 in our case, because we have just submitted the phase 2 proposal. So for instance, we have a duration from January 24 to December 30, with a total budget of 120 million euro. And we are one of the 50% co-funded partnership, because we have a lot of in-kind, no, not in-kind, additional activities. I like also the non-call activities, which was mentioned this morning. So you see here in kind, please ignore it. But we also implement also co-funded calls. Obviously, currently we have 3, but we plan to have yearly calls, 7 calls on a yearly basis. Currently 72 partners from 26 countries. We have also quite some regional authorities on board. We have a mix of funders and research performing organizations on board. I'm going to skip this quite not interesting for you for today. Slides are just telling you in terms of co-funded call. Yeah, we have started from the very beginning to implement as large co-funded calls as possible. As it's been already told, it's one of the most important items in this co-funded partnerships, because it generates for us also the biggest amount of EU funding, and it allows us, as Roland just described, by shifting a little bit of this EU contribution, or quite substantial amount of the EU contribution as reimbursement of the FSTP to finance some other activities which we couldn't do if they were not financed at a higher percentage than the reimbursement rate put in the grant agreement. So we have made a first call. We are right now in the middle of the second call, or going to finish the second call, and further are coming. So as a first step, I think we really need to separate two issues here. That's the grant agreement and the consortium agreement. They have some linkage. Obviously, consortium agreement must link to the articles of the grant agreement. But so the grant agreement is really only between the consortium and the granting authority. It's a contractual object, so it means you have to fulfill the proposal you have submitted at the beginning, the legal aspects in there, payment and reporting modalities. There is one single funding rate, which is 30, or in our case 50%, which is applies to the entire partnership, so to all cost categories and all beneficiaries. So there are no it's one single funding rate for everyone. The consortium agreement is only in the consortium, an internal arrangement as mentioned. It also can include the associated partners, by the way, even if the rule is different. But in our case, we had Switzerland and needed to be in there with their budget because they had national arrangement to get funded back then. So the associated partner are usually also part of consortium agreements, by the way. The content is more about internal arrangement, the financial distribution, the meetings, etc. You can use the models as showed already earlier today. And there is this possibility, as mentioned earlier, to apply different funding rates, which in our case we call internal reimbursement rates. And there are different scenarios, all the partnerships. I think each partnership has its own scenario. So I'm going to present mine. But yeah, there are people doing it a different way. It should be tailor-made for the partnership. It depends, of course, also if you are 30% or 50%. It depends on the amount of personnel or purchase or subcontracting or financial support to third-party costs that you have, so that it's from a financial point of view viable in the end. So just for instance, we have 8 work packages. So in these work packages, there are the administration, the usual administration work packages of the partnership, and we have a substantial amount also of research and innovation and accompanying activities like monitoring of agroecology, some capacity building, exploitation of results, science to policy, etc. Each of our work packages, because these are quite huge ones, has a leader and a deputy leader, task leaders also, and these work packages, that's all the cost categories are used in there, except the financial support of the parties, obviously. And then there are the co-funded calls, which is the FSTP, as it's been explained over the 2 days. And this FSTP is based on their own contribution from the beneficiaries, which are the funders in the co-funded calls, so national and regional funders' money. And what we call, in our case, the EU top-up, so it's the part of the EU money we use in the co-funded calls to fill the gaps, as Roland just described, but also in another way, where we ensure that everybody gets at least a little bit, every funder funding projects gets at least a little bit of the EU money. It's the most unpredictable cost category, in my point of view, this FSTP, because you never know what is going to be the scope of your call in 5 years. You never know what is the policy the policy context. There are funders stepping out, there are new funders stepping in. It's very variable cost category, I tend to say. Depends on the success rates of the applicant from your country. Sometimes no good proposal from your country and you're not even able to fund a project. So this is quite variable. So why do we use this internal reimbursement rate? Well, first of all, because we may, as said, the consortium agreement, including this internal reimbursement rate, is an internal matter of the consortium. Because we have to, because there are some costs which are hardly covered or co-funded by own contribution of the beneficiaries. For example, is somebody going to pay the entire maintenance of the website over 10 years of the partnership? Or the expert fees when you make the co-funded calls, who is going to pay for that or to pay even partly for that? The travel costs of many partners. I always experience that if you don't reimburse the travel costs, there are many partners who don't come to the meetings. These internal activities are reimbursed 50% if we use all 50%, are not as attractive in that case as not being part of the consortium, but just focusing on submitting projects or proposals in the co-funded calls, because usually the university submitted a proposal in Germany, they get 100% reimbursed for the project, the research project they are going to perform. So why using my personal capacity in a partnership where I get only 50%, why I could use my personnel and get 100% in the co-funded calls in the projects? So, and at least last, because we should use this internal reimbursement rate, it worked in the past, the Agroecology Fund, and it's also a way to optimize the flow of national and regional funding in the co-funded calls. Usually when one funder comes and has a budget of 1 million euro, let's say he can fund for 1.5 million euro, he doesn't need 50% of it back, but only 500,000 euro here in the example to fill the funding gaps. But if you reimburse him more than that, he will have 250,000 euro left on his bank account of the funder at the end of the year. He doesn't want to have that. He wants to spend 100% of his budget. So it's a way also to that point of view. So here, okay, it's been shifted. Okay, it's a problem, but just an example of the figures we had in the phase 1 proposal. So you can see the block of the work package costs, and at the bottom, I don't know why we don't see it, but the rest is the financial support to third parties. And so if we consider the scenario 1, these are the figures we would get in the second column, the figures of the allocation of the EU co-fund to the different cost categories. So on the one hand, if we say we stick to the rules of the grant agreement, it's easy to manage, it's 100% fair, everybody gets 50% reimbursed, and there are no big risks in terms of not keeping the promises in terms of the co-funded goal. If we don't fund as much as promised in the grant agreement in the FSTP, it has no impact on the other cost categories. But this 50% co-fund, as I explained earlier, it's very often not satisfying for some partners because subcontracting, purchase costs, or at least the travel costs, and some other type of costs are very hard to co-fund for many partners, if not the vast majority of them. And we notice here there are some partners who have still a higher administrative burden. That's the work package leaders, because they have such big work packages, they have some administrative burden on top of that. One scenario we rejected from the very beginning, so a scenario where we apply internal reimbursement rate, was not to treat all the partners with the same rule. So there are some partnerships doing so, saying the work package leaders get all their costs reimbursed 100%. We didn't want to do it because it was not entirely necessary, first of all, and if it's not necessary, why do it? And secondly, because of being fair among all partners. So all the partners have the same reimbursement rates in the end. So as I was telling you, this is how we started to work on that. We said we are going, first of all, we decided to put, the subcon. So we calculated what do we have as subcontracting and purchase costs, because these are the type of costs which we need to reimburse 100%. The travel cost, the expert fees, the subcontracting, yeah. So it represented that amount of money. You can see 6.23 million euro out of the entire EU contribution. We deducted that. We applied the reserve fund, so it was put aside already from the very beginning, and we will see later on during the monitoring of the finances of the partnership how we use it, and if we need it to cover some underspending in the FSTP. And then we noticed what we have left to be distributed, so this amount of money. Of course, assuming that we really get 60 million euro EU contribution at the end, it means that our costs are recognized eligible, of course. And so we came to this scenario, so saying that you can see the type of categories which are reimbursed 100% are there on the left-hand side. And with the rest, I told you this 49 million euro we have here, we could calculate that we could reimburse the personal costs, the internally invoiced goods and services, which is almost nothing here, and the indirect cost at a rate of approximately 60%. Could be more, could use maybe some of the reserve, but for instance, we can promise more. So we start from the minimum scenario, and in the end, maybe we can make a gift of a little bit more. And in terms of the part of the financial support to third party, here you can see it's a range, it's an imprecise range, and I don't want to promise a percentage for the financial support to third parties, because the more we fund, and that's what we want in the end, is of course to fund as many good proposals as possible, well, the lower the reimbursement rate of the FSTP, because the EU contribution doesn't extend. Even if we fund twice more than originally planned, it will not mean that we will receive twice more EU contribution. But the idea here is to use as much national and regional money to fund as many good projects as possible, with an appropriate use of the amount of EU contribution we have. We said, okay, the scenario is almost good, but we still need to take care a little bit of the work package leaders. So this is where we made a little bit of gift to the work package leaders and deputy leaders. And so we said each work package leader gets 2 person months reimbursed 100% per year. So it makes that it's no more 60% in total, but 61 or 62% for this work package leader in the end of the year for the personal costs, and the deputy leader will get 1 person month per year reimbursed 100%. 100%. It represents 1.3 million euro. In a huge partnership like that, it was not that catastrophic. So this is where we in the end landed. It's the same scenario almost with this 1.3 million euro added. Still, I got to say, having done all that, so we still must always keep in mind, and this is where you must make a good financial monitoring. Keep in mind, well, first check the underspending or overspending in the different cost categories of your work packages. In particular, let's imagine in terms of travel and subsistence, here we have 2.44, and we notice after 1 year we have spent 1 million euro. This will put in question a scenario, because if we spend travel and subsistence reimbursed at 100%, have that rhythm, at that rhythm of 1 million per year, we will land to much more than 2.4 here, but to 7 million euro. We need to revise the scenario possibly. And always keep in mind, take care, make sure that your co-funding calls are as successful as possible, because all this scenario relies on the fact that we will really spend this amount of money, so this 75 million euro in 3 calls, which has well started because in the first call we have 37 or something like that. But still, it must be really taken care of. All this scenario relies on the fact that you're lowering the EU contribution in the co-funded calls to compensate or to better reimburse other cost categories. So just as a summary, rather. So we have applied 100% internal reimbursement rates for the cost categories, subcontracting, purchase costs, and small bonuses for the work package leaders and deputy leaders. The rest is 60% reimbursement rates. We have put aside, actually, I told you this reserve funds we have put aside, it's approximately the amount which is generated by the indirect costs in our project. It was an earlier recommendation in area learned to do that, in particular because the indirect cost is maybe the only cost category some organization do not need to get reimbursed 100%. They don't get it already in Horizon Europe because, as an example, we don't calculate our indirect costs in our organization as in Horizon Europe, and our real indirect costs are higher than 25% direct costs because they are calculated like 50% of personal cost, or I don't know anymore the exact amount. So the indirect cost is maybe something that some organization may be more flexible than for other things. And so, what is left, actually, we have 25 million euro EU contribution left, having considered this above noted funding rates and internal reimbursement rate. We have approximately 25 million euro left that we can use in the co-funded calls. So this is the point here. I don't speak about the reimbursement rate of the co-funded calls in the co-funded calls. We say we have 25 million euro, 3 calls, approximately 8 million euro per call, maybe a little bit more. It's in particularly interesting to say we have 8 million euro, and when you go through your ranking list in your co-funded calls, you notice, I need only 200,000 euro to fund one entire good research project with 5 other funders who still have money. Okay, I put 200 more from the EU, and I have one more excellent project to fund. So to be a little bit flexible between the calls also. Yeah, and so our reserve funds, it will be monitored. Anyway, we will check via internal monitoring of the finances. If we can say, okay, at some point, yeah, it's sure the calls are running so well, we will not run into any problem, we can use parts of this reserve funds to reimburse a little bit better the personal costs of the partners, or not, or we wait. Or we can also decide to do something else with it. Well, not to do something else like that with it, but to use it in a co-funded call to, as I told you, to go much further in the ranking list. It's always important to plan this to be on the safe side. Having said this, I thank you for your attention, and don't hesitate to ask questions.
Thank you. So now I hope we have, because the next presentation is done by online presenters. I hope we have them with us. So now we are moving to data transfer and BMR requirements. That BMR is again part of your quiz and test if you know the acronyms. I don't know if anyone have counted the number of acronyms we have used during these 1.5 days so far, but there are a number. This time it's Francesco di Pierluigi from the European Commission and Effie Amanatidou from the Airlearn. So please.
Thank you a lot. I don't know if you can hear me, and I will try to share the presentation.
Next slide.
No, you just stay next slide because it's on our
Okay.
computer. So
Okay,
don't
so I
try
don't need to share.
Just tell. Yeah.
Okay. So, good morning, good afternoon, actually. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to present today. My name is Pierluigi Di Francesco, and I am the team leader of the data team in the Common Knowledge Management Service Unit in the GRTD. And I'm here together with my colleague Andre from the IT department. Our aim today is like very brief, very like quick overview to walk you through the context, challenges and solutions related to the structured data collection on the implementation of Horizon Europe, with particular focus on reporting aspects involving European partnership. So we will begin with just short legal and policy background before moving to the solution developed and the next steps. So we can go through to the next slide. So let me start with the legal framework. Before 2021, partnership monitoring was handled separately from the overall monitoring evaluation strategy of the framework program. But since Horizon Europe, however, this has changed, and monitoring of European partnership has been fully integrated into the wider Horizon Europe monitoring evaluation framework. This integration is supported by a strong legal basis. Article 50 of the regulation requires, in fact, the Commission to continuously and systematically monitor inputs, outputs, and impacts, of course, and to make this information publicly available in a single EU database. In addition, Annex 3 sets out the specific obligation for monitoring, reporting, or partnership aligned with the overall program. This includes also the key impact pathways framework described in Annex 5. The purpose is clear: to ensure transparency and accountability, to support evidence-based decision-making, and to provide aggregated performance reporting across all instruments, including, of course, partnership. We can move to the next slide.
I'm trying to get it to work. I'll just share. It seems to be stuck online while we see the slides changing, so I'm not sure why. Can you see the right slides now? Yes.
Yes.
Fine. Is this perfect?
We can move to the next. Yeah, perfect. Thank you a lot. So despite the obligation that I described before, several challenges have limited our ability to collect and report complete and consistent data. First, many partnerships do not use e-grants, which makes harmonized data collection more difficult. Second, the cascade funding mechanism implemented by several partnerships, so the so-called financial support to third parties, has not been centrally integrated into the data warehouse. And third, there has been no structured access to project level results. So the problem that we have faced related to the fragmented and siloed data flows, incomplete and inconsistent reporting, and consequently clear barriers to comprehensive program level monitoring evaluation. So what did we do? We can move to the next slide. Thank you. So to address these issues, the GRTD has developed XML-based structured templates. And these templates bring several advantages. They ensure legal compliance with reporting obligations, providing harmonized format, so making data comparable and transparent. They enable integration into the corporate data warehouse, which is the main goal, They also allow dynamic synchronization when project details change, and they support eventually the data-driven evaluation and policy feedback. In short, structured data enables smarter monitoring, deeper insight, and stronger accountability. And it is important that what I want to stress is that the existing templates and those up to come are designed to capture only the minimal set of data necessary to meet the reporting evaluation requirements on our side. So those that we demand partnership in order, of course, to ensure consistency throughout the full program life cycle, from proposal submission to project implementation and results reporting. So to have a better look, we can move to the next slide. Thank you. So two templates are already in use. They will have been released in September 2023, and they are aligned with the first two key stages of the project lifecycle. So we have the proposal template, which captures project metadata, applicant profiles, and organization types. And along with that, the project template for the funded project, which covers grant agreement details, partner roles, funding breakdowns, and so forth. Both are available on ERA-Learn platform, and the download package also includes an Excel file and a specific guideline to help users understand and complete the XML structure that we demand to fill in. We can move to the next slide as well, because beside the two existing one on popular demand, we are also developing a third template that related to, that it's aimed to address the current blind spot, meaning a structure reporting for project level results, the outputs. So the new template will collect information on publication, data sets, IPRs, also communication and dissemination activities, researchers' team profile, and with this we will therefore be able to assess impact of the framework program level, identify policy contribution and uptake, and monitoring like mainly the innovation maturity, including the TRL levels, technology readiness level of the output. So like the other templates, this is fully aligned with the Horizon Europe periodic reporting requirements, the usual one. So if we move to the next slide, you can see here an example of the accompanying Excel file that serves as a user-friendly reference to guide partnership in filling in the XML template correctly and consistently. And thank you to my colleague Andre, to whom I will leave the floor now. We can get more details through the technical aspect of the integration and submission mechanism.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll leave to you, Andre.
Thank you, Pier. Hello, my name is Andrea Valenti, and I work in strict collaboration with Pierluigi, but on the IT spectrum of things. Could you please move to the next slide? So we have we selected XML as a structured format used to store and transport the data. This file will be provided by you when you want to share the data. We will provide you the XSD, which is a set of rules that allow you to test your XML before you send it to us. And the point of contact is going to be an SFTP, which will arrive to you as a link, and it's a secure file protocol, transfer protocol area, where you will upload your files under a set of folders that will be provided. To access this area, we will provide you on the request a PPK, which is a digital key. Next slide, please. Okay. This is a very nice diagram that shows the life cycle. So the XML will be uploaded to the SFTP. You will use, as I said, the link and the PPK that we will provide you. Once the files are there, we daily check that area and we'll download it on our side, perform some validations, and integrate the data so that it can be consumed on reporting. Next slide, please. So the upload side, the authentication key needs to be requested, as already said, and the partner should upload the XML files to the secure area. Our initial file handling, it's going to be checking the naming conventions and the set of rules that are required for us to download the data, the files on our side. Next slide, please. Second phase, it's the validation. So we perform two types of validations. One, I already explained, it's on XSD. This one, we do it, we check it on our side. Either way, you will have the XSD available once you subscribe, and you will be able to perform this testing. So this XSD will check the structure of the data that you are providing, and then we have a set of business that we call business rules and validations that are specific validations that we are doing on our side. For example, if a PIC exists in PDM and we can accept that as a legal entity, or if there are any duplicates, things like this. Every error is logged and reported, and it's going to be sent to the partnership at the end of the day via automated emails with very short comment on what has gone wrong. If it is an XSD error, so it's a structured error, or if it is an error that regards any business rules that we have in place. Obviously, these business rules, once you will subscribe, will be you will have the list of them. So don't be scared, because you will know what fails and what does not fail. And the recipients of these emails are defined by you. So once you want to upload files and you request your PPK, it is also nice to have a mailing list of profiles on your side, maybe IT profiles, that will get and interpret the reports. Next slide, please. So the final part, it's once the file is uploaded, the file is downloaded, is validated, it will be integrated in our data warehouse, and obviously will be enriched with the data that we already have. It will be transformed, and then it will be ready for consumption. Next slide, please. So here, just a very fast overview of the type of errors that we get today from the experience that we have with the partnerships that are already integrating the system. We may experience incorrect naming convention of the files. The file is not in the correct folder structure, or the file is sent with a non-UTF-8 encoding characters inside the XML. We give feedback on these errors, so don't be scared. Once this fails, you will know why, and we are on top of things. So we actively monitoring the system, the files, and the validations, and we are available for answers. Then if we go, for example, the other type of validation when we get errors is missing mandatory elements. Some elements are defined as mandatory in the data that you are providing us. These ones, if they are not provided, it will fail the file entirely. Invalid data types. You may send a text in a number column. It's a problem. An incorrect element order matters. Incorrect value ranges. If we are expecting, for example, a positive number, if you send us a negative number, it will be a problem. These are structural. These two first groups, you will be able to cross-check them on your side with your IT teams, because the XSD, as I said, it will be provided to you. And then we have the logical business rules and problems that we may get that are not catched by the other two. So it may be, for example, the same peak, the same funding agency appears 2 times. It's a problem. We have invalid dates and formats, malform formats, and logical inconsistencies with the dates, with the numbers, or with the text we are expecting. Obviously, the missing required data, because we have 2 different programs. Some of them may not fail at XSD level, but when we go to the rules, it may fail. And unmapped reference data. So some codes, some peaks. For example, you send us a country code that does not exist. It will be an error, and you will get reported on. Okay. So then you can fix it and you can resend the file. That's me. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Pierre.
Thank you a lot, Andrea, for the technical review. And if we can move to the next and I think last slide, just to mention the next steps. Yes, to conclude, what we will do is we will complete the technical development of the results template that we briefly shown here, ensuring usability and compliance with the existing requirements. Moreover, we'll keep working with partnership to identify any constraints and explore even like more alignment with their existing systems and workflow. And on the light of this vein, what we're actually currently doing is collecting feedback also for the existing templates, those for project and proposals, to sort of revamp according to some specific and shared business needs across partnership. So we are currently on the way of finalizing a revamped second version of those, while finalizing the results template. On this topic, a pilot phase will test functionality usability, and the goal is that by like Q4 this year or the beginning of next year to have all the 3 up and running. Of course, trying to keep and guaranteeing the provision of guidance, address challenges, and have also this open channel and share understanding with all stakeholders. So thank you a lot. I think that we were able to remain in the time constraints. I guess that this presentation will be provided to the participants, so you can contact us to the function mailbox that are shown on screen now. I don't know if we'll have time for a few quick questions now to digest the information that we provided. But anyway, you can either reach us to this function mailbox, or I assume that Ireland colleagues can collect and forward to us any clarification or any specific question that this presentation may have raised. Thank you a lot. Thank you, Andrea, and thank you for the opportunity provided.
Let's move on to the next slide right away. So I first want to clarify, as you see on the slide, the monitoring and evaluation of the partnerships is an obligation according to the Horizon Europe regulation. And of course, this means that at some point, as it was presented earlier, the project level information will be aggregated under partnerships and become available sometime on eCorda and the Horizon dashboard, as it is usually the case with the rest of the Horizon Europe instruments and their projects. We can move to the next slide. Now, what I will talk to you about is the middle one. So if we just click once again, you will see the second level highlighted. Whereas thank you very much, in the Newcomers guide that EuroLearn has been working on, we cover all 3 different levels. So the level of the framework program, which is currently Horizon Europe, and this refers primarily to the projects and the cascade projects for the co-funding partnerships and their evaluation and their impact assessment. And the other level that we are not going to talk about today is the program level of the individual partnership, which primarily is the own monitoring and evaluation system that its partnership may decide to design and develop. Now, if we go to the next slide, here we are going to talk about the BMR approach, and the BMR approach is rather complementary to the other levels. If we click once more, you will see that the BMR approach covers the common indicator survey, and this common indicator survey addresses horizontal cross-cutting topics, evaluation topics, not specific to any particular partnership or partnership type, and it also covers the partnership as a policy instrument rather than the individual funded projects that primarily Horizon Europe Key Impact Pathways will be addressing, or the partnership-specific monitoring systems will be addressing. So this is a complement to what you may also decide to do inside your own partnership, or to what Horizon Europe with the Key Impact Pathways will be addressing at the project level. Next slide, please. Now, the BMR approach primarily collects data through, as we said, the common indicator survey at the partnership phases and the country phases. And if we click once again, we'll see that primarily we're going to talk today about these first two. Now, we can move on to the next slide. So the common indicator survey is an online survey that is addressing partnerships with specific questions, either quantitative questions or qualitative questions, under specific headlines. And these headlines are the usual evaluation issues, the so-called evaluation topics: additionality, directionality, visibility, positioning at international level, openness, coherence, synergies with other tools. And possibly the past experience, we had additional relevant questions for the thematic focus of each BMR. May I also make another clarification here? I am talking about the previous experiences of the two BMRs that were assigned to expert groups, and I was part of these expert groups, whereas now this approach has changed. The preparation of the next two BMRs will be done through a framework contract that DG RTD is handling, and whereas there are going to be slight changes building on the shortcomings of the past and the lessons learned, there are going to be, the specific focus and attention will be paid so that the process and the content will be comparable and continued to the degree possible. If we go to the next slide. Yes, so some examples of the indicators we have, I have chosen a couple of those addressing additionality and directionality. The first one is the progress in terms of financial and in-kind contributions or from the partners other than the union. And here you see the committed vs actual contributions, and also you see in-kind contributions. So bear with me, we already know that there are different definitions of in-kind contributions for different types of partnerships, and these have been taken into consideration in order to improve the clarity of the common indicator survey and the specific indicators such as this one from one BMR to another. Another indicator which was the broader investments made beyond as part of the partnership, but in addition to it. And again, here you see additional activities, and here there are definitions for additional activities depending on the partnership type. And these have already been factored in, and we want to gather as much information as possible, qualitative as well as quantitative information, and also with a specific clarifications that you feel that you need to make. So there is space organized in this survey for you to record everything, to respond to everything, and also provide as many clarifications as you wish. If we go to the next one. So we have an example of international visibility and positioning. Here you might see that we want both quantitative information, but also qualitative information. If there is a guesstimate about how much money you may be devoting to internationalization through work packages and specific tasks, if you have also, and we give also examples here, so what these could be at the program level and what these could be at the project level. And also we ask to specify which way you are calculating what you are giving us in the survey. As I said, space is available for all the quantitative and qualitative information you may wish to report. Another example, if we go to the next slide. This is the openness and transparency. Here you see two examples of both qualitative information. So do you have measures to be open and transparent, and also what kind of measures are you think they are most important for you? So we also have descriptions. We also have examples to show about indicator 6, where we want the membership of the partnerships. And we fully understand the BMR has taken also note that this might be too complicated for specific types of partnerships to address, especially with associations that have hundreds of members. And yes, this has been recorded as a challenge, and efforts are being made to address this more efficiently and effectively. And I think we have another example. So coherence and synergies, here you see some type of information that is more or less not being monitored, but this is equally important. So what are you doing in collaboration with other partnerships and missions? You can choose from the partnership, there is a list, and also you can choose from the following activities that you collaborate with them. And also, besides the partnerships and the missions, we are also talking about collaboration and synergies with other EU programs, like, for example, Digital Euro program. So this type of activities that a partnership may be doing without necessarily understanding and realizing that it's important to monitor. However, it is important to monitor in terms of, the collection of experiences, collection of synergies, and, to be as rich as possible to justify impact and good performance. If we go to the next one. Now, the lessons learned. As I said, interpretation of specific terms have been varied. There is difficulty for partnerships to address the baselines. So where do you start from and what is your target? And there is lack of methodologies to monitor specific indicators, and also lack of monitoring certain indicators. So either we don't measure specific indicators, or we don't know how to measure specific indicators. Let's go to the next slide. Now, moving on to the partnership fishes. I'm only going to use a couple of slides here. Next slide, please. So here we are talking about not new information again. We don't, the BMR has not been asking you to build new information, but draw on your own information and give it in a more structured way, the so-called partnership-specific impact pathways. And we also ask you to, we have asked you to make sense about the different types of objectives that you may have defined, together with the impact indicators, your KPIs, key performance indicators. So there needs to be a connection between these two. So if we go to the next slide, the process of the BMR has been highly interactive. So you may be hearing new things, but the process is highly interactive with the partnerships community. The process has been applied of a specific experts being assigned with a certain number of partnerships that he advises, that he helps along the way. And we believe that this kind of high interaction is going to be continued in the future. And also, it's not the difficult templates, and the KPI tables and PSIPS graphs are pretty easy to collect. If we move on to the next slide. This is something like an example, going from operational level objectives to general level objectives. We'll move to the next slide. This is another example of having the objectives on the left-hand side and your KPIs on the right-hand side, where it is important to seek consistency. And then another example in the next slide, where you see well-structured information, but then you have to be careful so that your objectives are measurable. So what is the objective? How we can measure the objective? Be very concrete at the level of the actions and the pathways from the objective through the actions to the possible outcomes and the impact of a partnership. If we move on to the next one. Now, what we've learned until now is that there is a variety of ways of depicting the intervention logic. And, there have been challenges in developing the PSIPs, the so-called partnership-specific impact pathways. Also, sometimes we do not really connect the objectives to the identified indicators, and we should be doing that. KPIs should be concrete and measurable. And some partnerships have also been developing complicated monitoring and evaluation systems unnecessarily. Now, what we also have found out is that the BMR information is not legally binding. Okay, so it is up to you to provide this, but it goes without saying that going through this training and learning process will make you better understand what is your partnership, how it is performing, and what is the impacts and outputs and outcomes that you may not realize on the way, but there are there, and it makes sense for you to record and develop a good monitoring system for all this information to come out. Of course, besides the partnership specific results that you already designed to achieve. And this, of course, means that you have to have internal resources and competencies, and you have to make the time and the effort needed for this monitoring system to be in place. Now, for the country's requirement, next slide, please. I only show the 4 pages of a country fiche. This is divided to qualitative information and quantitative. Until now, the BMR experts have been pre-filling in the information, the quantitative information, and we're asking for countries to fill in the qualitative information. Go to the next slide. Some challenges that you can see at your own page. We move forward because the audience is about the partnerships themselves, although some of you may also be requested to fill in country information. But you can see it in your own pace as the slides are going to be available. And my final one is the final slide, please, is where to get assistance. We are here, EuroLearn is here to help you. This is not just imposed upon you and you're left alone. First of all, as I've been saying quite several times, the BMR approach is highly interactive. And of course, EuroLearn is here to help with a specific toolkit that is devoted to the evaluation and the monitoring of the partnerships. And we are also carrying out webinars dedicated to the monitoring and evaluation of partnerships. And here there are, 3 of the past examples where you can also check the slides and the experiences besides the RIPE toolkit that is online. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Effie. Do we have any questions from the audience on the BMR? Do we have any questions online? Just one question. What would you say is sort of the impact of having this BMR? What is really the added value and for who?
As I said before, partnerships are not just individual instruments. They are policy instruments. They are not program, limited to a program definition. So besides what the evaluation, what kind of evaluation is carried out, either it is on the partnership specific level or the impact and the outcomes of the projects that the partnership funds, which is the Horizon Europe level, the project level, there is this element of the partnership as a policy instrument that not only funds projects, it also does alignment activities, it also shapes strategies, it also influences and is influenced by strategic priorities, and so on and so forth. So there are all these different kinds of elements that the partnership does as a policy instrument that are not captured in any other level of monitoring and evaluation that we have until now. So I believe that the BMR approach really answers whether the policy instrument of the partnerships, how it performs in relation to additionality, in relation to effectiveness, in relation to efficiency, in relation to internationalization, and so on, basically why the partnerships were created in the first way.
Good, thank you. I think we say thanks again, Effie, and thank you for joining us online. And we move on to the next presentation. And then now we are going to the phasing out strategy and how to go towards the sustainable ecosystem. And again, it's Kathrin Kapfinger from RTD that will give the presentation. Please, Kathrin.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone, again from my side. I have the very grateful slot now of talking to you about phasing out right before lunch. But if you stay with me, this presentation shouldn't take too long, and we will dive right in. So to talk a little bit about the rationale or the background behind these phasing out strategies. So just to clarify what phasing out means in the sense of the Horizon Europe regulation is a possibly gradual discontinuation of funding from the framework program. So this, so phasing out in itself does not mean discontinuation of the partnership. It does not mean that the partnership could not be funded by other union funding programs or by national funding programs, but the phasing out refers to funding from the framework program specifically only in the current Horizon Europe regulation. Just again, as a kind reminder, as I already hinted at yesterday, it's important to familiarize yourself with your legal base and the legal obligation for partnerships to develop a phasing out strategy. So a strategy that would lead to phasing out of the partnership from framework program funding is set out in the partnership provisions in the current regulation. This applies to all types of partnerships, so this is not just an obligation on co-funded partnerships, but it refers to all partnerships funded by Horizon Europe. This is kind of, as I mentioned yesterday, one of the novelties, let's say, of Horizon Europe, that the life cycle related to partnerships got kind of rounded off with this, let's say, consideration of a sunset clause. But what we would really like these phasing out strategies to be is a forward-looking exercise and an opportunity for partnerships to articulate and communicate a strategic vision for the future role and evolution of the partnership to also ensure its continued legacy. Again, developing a phasing out strategy does not mean that your partnership will be discontinued. It is not something that just because you develop a great phasing out strategy that we will say, okay, this is great, please implement it. That is not at all what that means. But what should be mentioned again, as this is a legal requirement for all partnerships, if this is completely disregarded, this could be seen as a weakness in assessing the partnership's performance in terms of its fulfillment of the legal obligations. As I said, I don't want to be too long. We also just had a dedicated workshop on phasing out last Thursday, I believe, online, and we will make sure that the recording of this workshop, the presentations, and also dedicated questions and answers document that we're working on will be published shortly. This workshop was based on guidelines for the development of phasing out strategies that were circulated in July, because we noticed that there was still a lot of unclarity on the side of partnerships in terms of what was expected from these phasing out strategies. And let's just say those partnerships that had legal deadlines to comply with for the adoption of their phasing out strategies we've seen haven't necessarily always stuck to these deadlines. So this is why we also said, okay, now is the time, also in the context of FP10 preparations, to maybe clarify a little bit and to provide a little bit of support to the partnerships to get these reflections really going. So what one of the colleagues in my team has been working on quite hard over the last few months was to, on the one hand, provide these guidelines. So it's a short document. I think it's 4 or 5 pages. I linked it here. It's on the Ireland website. That sets out again the rationale, the background of this exercise, and kind of what we expect. And we will dive into this on the next slide. And the idea is that we will now try to align the timelines and the process of these phasing out reflections and strategies across all those partnerships that have not yet kicked this off or fulfilled this obligation yet. And in order to do that, what we've done also during the workshop was we thought it would be best to coordinate partnerships among the thematic clusters. So depending on which work program part or cluster your partnership is funded from, we've tried to, or we will try to connect you, put you in touch with each other so that you can cross-fertilize basically your reflections on the future with partnerships that are active in your sector. So here you see a bit of a timeline for this process as we envisioned or suggested. In July, we've kicked it up with the circulation and publication of these guidelines that I was just talking about. Now in September, we had this online workshop on the design of phasing out strategies, where we had a lot of attendance, a lot of engagement, and again, we're currently working on the follow-up, and we'll try to have all of the materials published soon. The idea is that we would have subsequent or like a feedback round, basically. So what we're asking is partnerships to provide a first draft of their strategies by mid-December, by the 15th of December, that you share. So basically, partnerships share their draft strategies with Commission services. So this includes both the relevant policy or line service, as well as with my unit who works on the policy coordination. And then we would jointly provide you feedback by the end of January 2026. So tailor-made feedback to like enrich your reflections, and then to have these strategies or first iteration of these strategies finalized and adopted by spring 2026. In terms of what the guidelines say about what we would like these documents to look like, first of all, it is important to say these are guidelines. We very consciously decided against providing a template because we think there's enough templates that you have to deal with and fill out already. So we really wanted to give the partnerships the flexibility to come up with, or to be as flexible in how you want to approach, present, develop these strategies as possible. To us, they should be very concise, strategic, and living documents. Again, especially as we approach or go into FP10 preparations, and over the coming months or years, we will have more clarity, not just on the future of the instrument, but also on the future portfolio of partnerships. You might want to adapt your strategies. The idea is also that we try to open them up so they do not just have to be papers that outline what happens if there is no EU framework program funding for your partnership in the future, but we also wanted to give you the space to explore alternative scenarios. So you may develop several scenarios. We said in less than 3 pages per scenario. We don't want these strategies to be super heavy exercises or PhD theses. They should really be, again, concise strategic documents. We did identify a few elements that we think, or that should be in all of the strategies. So one would be at least one credible scenario without framework program funding. Otherwise, your strategy will just not comply with the legal obligation of being a phasing out strategy. But again, you may develop other alternative scenarios where you see your partnership evolve in different ways in the future, where you may assume or suggest that you will be funded through framework program funding in the future. But there must be at least one credible scenario that covers what would happen without framework program funding. For each scenario, we ask you to develop or to basically state what an alternative implementation modality would be. We ask that these scenarios are realistic and actionable pathways, and that they are attached to an indicative timeline. We say that, or we would like to see some indicators for assessing progress towards the phasing out. Here, the idea is not to develop an extensive second layer of KPIs or heavy monitoring or indicators, but if, for instance, you're saying if there is no framework program funding in the future, we will have to start charging membership fees, that there's indicators towards how these membership fees over time would basically become or make up greater parts of your revenue streams, for instance. We also ask that scenarios are consistent with the overall strategic orientation of the partnership and in coherence with the policy context. So, for instance, that they do not duplicate or contradict other existing or foreseen initiatives that are planned. So what I would say, what I would like to say at the end of this is that we really want this to not be a box-ticking exercise. This is also not an exercise or process to antagonize you or the partnerships, but it's really about triggering anticipatory thinking about a future in which funding for research and innovation might become more scarce or redirected or focused on strategic priorities that may not make it possible to keep all of the partnerships running in the shape or the form that they currently are. And in general, we just want to highlight that it's good practice in terms of policy making and project execution to make or to ensure that you're prepared for different scenarios. So this is really about making your partnerships more resilient, not weaker. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Kathrin. Questions or comments to the phasing out? Anyone? To start.
Thank you very much for the presentation. As far as I understood now, you have to present several strategies. One of them is without the co-funding from the framework program. And as far as I also understood, you might present strategies that, for example, present strategies of merging your partnership with, e.g., another partnership in your field. So it is in the phasing out workshop, there were, of course, partnerships from several formats, which I think was very, very good for all the partnerships to hear. What have you been doing on these strategies already? What is your experience about it? Which field are you from? Who are the actors in the field? And maybe there are some things that we really can do together and put together. And so that might be emerging, or partnerships might be one of these scenarios, which would not count for that scenario without EU funding, obviously.
Thank you. Indeed. So again, the idea is that you have, where did it go? That you have to develop. So the one scenario or the one thing that your strategy absolutely has to cover, that is the bottom line, is that you need to have one scenario without framework program funding. But again, if you want to develop other scenarios, which might, for instance, be okay, we would merge with another partnership, or we would be funded through another union funding program, or we would evolve into another type, or we would be funded under another scheme or instrument. You may do that, because we were approached also several times by partnerships that were saying, okay, but where can we reflect, or where can we make statements about our future in this FP10 process, for instance? And we think that the phasing out strategies, if you look at them a little bit broader as transition strategies for the future are actually the place where you can do that now already. And what you were saying on how, so you can prepare other scenarios, you don't have to, as long as you have one that complies with the compulsory elements, that is fine. And then what you were saying in terms of helpful reflections from other partnerships active in similar sectors, that's exactly why we tried to make this a bit of a peer learning exercise and to bring together the partnerships from the different clusters in this process to really, as you were saying, Christiane, to kind of have those that have already kicked off these reflections, maybe share their experiences, to really like start a bit like today, a very honest, peer learning and experience sharing process that could benefit everyone and indeed also foster common reflections on possible collaborations, mergers, whatsoever in the future. So really see this also as an exercise where you can be quite creative.
Good. More questions? No? So that's good. So there are important deadlines or points for having feedback. It's really something that will be make the partnerships more robust. It's kind of a contingency plan and making return on the investment from the member states and the Commission better. And so, yeah, thank you again, Kathrin.